I'm a pasta eater. I like pasta. I could eat pasta every day in a week. She gets mad as hell. She gets mad at me. She says, you eat too much pasta. My father was like that too.
You find in Italy people eat smaller portions of pasta than they do here. Very seldom do you ever sit down and have a half a pound of macaroni put in front of you and call that supper.
We were poor, but our grandparents and our parents didn't make us feel that way. And you talk about today two types of foods that I want to talk about affectionately, and one is bruschetta bread and the other is polenta. Now, polenta, my grandmother for $5 or $6 would buy a 50-pound bag and could probably feed the entire neighborhood, but that's something that we ate 2, 3, 4 times a week. Certainly pasta, and you could use that as a filler, and that's what it was for. It was a filler. Bruschetta bread, as you know, is basically that's stale bread because nothing went to waste. And so what my grandmother would do basically is she'd make this food with it that the bread would be stale. She'd put it under the water, under the sink. We had the porcelain sinks. She would put a little oil on it, a little salt, a little pepper, a little oregano, and that was your snack. And she let it dry on the porcelain sink. And you'd come home from school, and you were hungry, and it was 2:30, 3 o'clock, and that was your carryover, till the supper time. And so my brother and I would break a chunk off, run out the door, and that's what we had. I don't even want to call it a dessert. And now people pay, $8, $9, $10, $11 a dish for that. And the same thing with polenta. I mean, it's just an amazing thing when you walk in a restaurant and you're seeing what people are paying for this stuff, and the stuff that we ate it every day. Those are the types of things that you remember that mean so much to say, this is how I grew up. And she'd have the bread, and it was a filler.
I can remember as a youngster helping my mother make the pasta every Sunday. That was a ritual. We had to make our cavadis, my mother used to make the farfallas, used to make the tagliatelle. That was so delicious. It was handmade, and it came from the heart.
One of my grandfathers, every Sunday there was a big issue. And the issue was, we have to make pasta today. And I can remember, even on different occasions, when if he didn't get the flour that he wanted, he would be very upset because the pasta was not going to be al dente the way he wanted it to be, and it might not be as good. And you could see this look of concern on his face, and it was always good. But he had this concern. And on Sundays, and especially holidays, I would help him do these little things, which I don't remember specifically what they were. I just remember enjoying doing this. And I can remember him cutting fettuccine and putting it all over a bed that had all newspapers all over it so it could dry properly, and waiting for the proper time, or making another item called cavatelli. So it just seemed like, as I look back and I'm saying, I was programmed for this without ever realizing what was going on. And it was just great, and I think about it often.
It's the same pasta, only this has got cottage cheese, but the Italian, when you ricotta, you must hear that. And there's got potatoes. Potatoes and flour, and this is cheese and flour.
And there's some ricotta in here. But the gnocchis is potatoes, made of potato. It's tastier than this, I think.
That's what I just said.
You can have string pasta, which is like a linguine. You can have tubular pasta, let's say, which may be a rigatoni or a penne. Then you can have stuffed pasta, such as a ravioli, or an agnolotti, or a tortelloni. You could have something like a cannelloni, which is cylindrical. It's like a tube, and it's stuffed with ricotta or some other fillings that you may put in it. But basically, you're talking about 4 categories.
The smell of macaroni sauce. Not pasta, macaroni sauce.
In my house, it was macaroni, and that's what it was. Probably somewhere around the 1970s, it became pasta when we had to get a little more sophisticated. That strikes the same chord as gravy versus sauce,
I know everybody says, Italians say gravy, And I gather that when they translated the word for sauce in Italian, it came out that way. But it is sauce, it's not a gravy. Gravy is something that's brown.
My mother would always pride herself on the fact that we called it sauce. And the Italians who called it gravy, oh, they were cavonis or something. You know, they weren't as, you know, they called it gravy, but we called it sauce. But you know, if I'd walk in the house after school, my mother would have a pot of sauce going on the stove, tomato sauce. She'd look, you know, she'd say, would you like a little gravy put on your bread? We said, yeah, and you got a piece of Italian bread, put a little bit of gravy on it. Can I have gravy on my bread? Yeah, you can have gravy on your bread. But if there was company in the house, oh, sauce.
Not to have pasta during the week is like going to a rehab place. I mean, it's tough.
Tony Di Giacomo.
Bravo!
He's from Italy.
Teramo, yeah, the best city.
One of the finest pasta makers in America.